Welcome to the Karma Army. Names and details have been changed, but the justice, every word of it is real. My grandmother left behind a house, a small savings account, and a handwritten letter that she had updated every year for the last decade of her life. She also left behind my Uncle Gerald, and that, as it turned out, was the complication. My grandmother, I will call her Nora, was a woman of extraordinary practicality. She had grown up with very little, built a life with discipline and patience, and accumulated over 70 years of careful living, a modest but meaningful estate. The house alone was worth around £240,000 by the time she died. The savings came to roughly £30,000 more. By any ordinary measure, not a vast fortune, but enough to matter. Enough for families to fall apart over. And fall apart, I am sorry to say, is precisely what we did. Nora had 3 children. My mother, who had cared for her in the final 4 years of her life. My Aunt Patricia, who lived 2 hours away and visited at Christmas and occasionally called on birthdays. And Gerald. Gerald was the eldest. Gerald had always been the eldest, in the way that some people make their birth order a personality trait. He carried it with him into every room. The implicit assumption that seniority conferred authority, that being first gave him some fundamental right to be in charge. He was not a bad man in the ordinary sense of the word. He was not cruel, not violent, not openly dishonest in his daily life. He was just deeply, thoroughly convinced of his own importance in a way that made him capable of very bad things when that importance felt threatened. When Nora died, Gerald appointed himself executor of the estate. Nobody had asked him to. There was a solicitor, a local firm that Nora had used for years, a sensible woman named Mrs. Alderton, who had known the family for 2 decades, who had prepared the will and was perfectly capable of overseeing the process. But Gerald arrived at the first family meeting with a folder of printed documents and the air of someone who had already decided how things were going to go. He had a way of doing that, walking into a room as though the outcome had already been agreed upon somewhere else, in a meeting you hadn't been invited to, and the remaining discussion was merely a formality. My mother sat across the table from him that afternoon, with the expression of someone who had been watching this performance for 50 years and was very tired of it. The will was straightforward. Nora had left the estate to be divided equally between her 3 children, with a small specific bequest to each grandchild, including me. Clear, simple. The kind of will a practical woman writes when she has no interest in causing drama and every intention of being fair. What Gerald produced from his folder was something different. He claimed that he and Nora had made an arrangement in the final year of her life. A verbal agreement, he said, that he would receive the house outright in recognition of certain financial support he had supposedly provided her over the years. He had no documentation of this arrangement. He had no record of any financial transfers. He had, he explained with great solemnity, only his word. And his word, he clearly believed, should be sufficient. My mother was blindsided. Patricia looked confused in the particular way of someone who is processing something that doesn't fit any category they have prepared for. I was 26 years old and sitting at that table because my mother had asked me to come for moral support. And I was furious, the specific, clarifying fury of watching something blatant and unjust presented as reasonable by someone who has no doubt they will get away with it. Mrs. Alderton, to her professional credit, was unmoved. She explained calmly that verbal agreements of that nature, even if they could be demonstrated to have occurred, would not override a properly executed will without significant legal challenge. Gerald said he understood. Then he hired a solicitor of his own. The next 8 months were among the more exhausting of my life. Gerald's legal approach was, at its core, an attempt to delay and apply pressure. He raised challenges to the validity of the will, questioning whether Nora had been of sound mind when she had updated it 18 months before her death. He requested access to her medical records. He engaged a specialist to review her cognitive capacity. Every step added weeks. Every letter required a response. Every response cost money that came from the estate. Money that should have gone to his sisters and instead went to solicitors. And then he suggested, with elaborate and careful delicacy, that my mother had exerted undue influence over an elderly woman in her care. That was the one that broke something in me. My mother had given 4 years of her life to caring for Nora. She had managed medication schedules, attended hospital appointments, sat with her through 2 emergency admissions, arranged carers for the nights she could not be there herself. She had done all of this while working part-time, while raising her own family, while maintaining a household that had Nora in it more days than not toward the end. She had done it without complaint, without expectation, and without ever once, not once, suggesting that it entitled her to anything beyond the equal share her mother had already decided to give her. The suggestion that she had manipulated a vulnerable old woman was not simply wrong. It was a particular kind of cruelty, the kind that takes the most selfless thing a person has done and twists it into something suspicious. But I kept my head. My mother asked me to, and so I did. I went through every record we had, every GP appointment letter, every hospital correspondence, a diary my mother had kept during those years, not for any strategic purpose, just because she was the kind of person who processed difficult things by writing them down. Photographs with dates, text message threads between her and Nora stretching back years, a note written in Nora's own handwriting on a card that had come with a bunch of flowers, dated 14 months before she died. That said, "Thank you for everything you do every single day. I don't know what I would do without you." I also made a formal request, through Mrs. Alderton, for Gerald to produce documentation of the financial support he claimed to have provided. If he had been giving his mother money over a period of years, there would be bank records, transfers, receipts, something tangible that could be examined. He produced nothing, because there was nothing to produce, because the financial support had not existed, because Gerald had visited at Christmas and called occasionally and had told himself over the years that this constituted a relationship that entitled him to more than it did. The legal challenge collapsed within 2 months of us presenting our full documentation. Gerald's solicitor, we later learned through indirect channels, had advised him privately that the case had no merit, that the evidence for undue influence were non-existent, that the medical records supported Nora's capacity at the time the will was updated, and that continuing would cost him a great deal more money and almost certainly fail. Gerald withdrew the challenge. The estate was distributed according to the will. My mother received her third. Patricia received her third. Gerald received his third, the same share he would have received from the very beginning had he simply allowed the process to proceed as his mother had intended. His legal fees came to just over £11,000. He paid them entirely from his own inheritance. After everything settled, his share of the estate was less than half of what my mother and Patricia each received. He had spent £11,000 trying to take something that was never his to take, and had ended up with less than if he had done nothing at all. I do not know whether Gerald ever truly understood what he had done, not just to the family, not just to the process, but to himself. He had gambled Nora's memory on a lie. He had turned a grief into a legal battle. He had looked at his sister's 4 years of devotion and called it manipulation. The family has never fully recovered. We see him at funerals now. We are polite. But something was broken in those 8 months that I do not think anyone has the energy to repair. My mother owns a third of a house that her mother meant for her to have. She used part of it to pay off a debt she had been carrying quietly for years. She did not make a fuss about it. She did not mention it more than once, and the note in Nora's handwriting is framed on her kitchen wall. That is what I carry with me from all of it. Not the legal outcome, though it mattered. Not Gerald's £11,000, though I would be lying if I claimed I felt nothing when I heard. It is the note, the handwriting, the date. 14 months before she died, Nora knew exactly who had been there. She always had. I am part of the Karma army, and if someone has ever tried to rewrite the story of who showed up, who stayed, who gave up their time and their sleep and their peace of mind when it was needed, then you already know why we tell these stories. Justice has a long memory, and sometimes it keeps receipts. Subscribe. Leave a comment if this story brought something back for you. There are more where this came from.